Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. We got Roger with us today, as well as the lovely Muriel.
Hello.
Hi. Roger, hi. Welcome. Very much. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a great show lined up for you. So, Muriel, I'll let you just confirm the YouTube and Facebook feeds are working okay, if that's all right with you. Take it, that's all right. Okay.
Yeah, they're good.
Roger, stay with us on the very end as well. We'll catch up afterwards as well. Feeds are working. So someone just needs to mute their other feed. I think it's sorted. Okay, good. All right. So, Roger, welcome today, and thank you very much for very kindly agreeing to share lots of value as part of today's live stream. Those of you
having me.
Thank you. And those of you who are joining us as we speak, do introduce yourselves in the chat. We do love lots of questions, and this is being streamed out live over YouTube, Facebook, and also Twitter now. It used to be Periscope. So we've got a great discussion today about innovative social video production, say, to get results. And Roger is certainly a man who's covered many shows and got some great experiences to share as well. So I'm sure we'll thoroughly enjoy today. And I've just lost my stream. There we go. Just got it all back. Now, obviously, in terms of a quick reminder for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are very focused on helping people to build valued connections based on a deep relationship of trust. So do engage with each other through the chat as well. So in reality, we have a number of regular people here. And of course, what's happened is in a strange sort of way, you sort of become friends online, and that then leads to other things. And we're obviously clearly here to support you in the growth of your business. And if you enjoy these sessions, do set a reminder on Facebook and subscribe if you're on YouTube and hit that bell, as they say. And if you enjoyed today's session as well, do feel free to share as well. It'd be really good as well if you could tell us what you're really passionate about and why you do it. And be bold with questions. Roger is has considerable experience, and no doubt you will thoroughly enjoy those, Roger. So not setting up for a fall, of course. So I'm sure it will go swimmingly well. So the next part around all of this really is a very quick introduction from myself and Muriel before we come on to Roger. And those of you who know me, I founded Business Growth Bureau about 7 years ago. Feel very passionately you should look after your suppliers, your clients, your advocates, your investors, your staff, your teams, and is what I class as building on circular relationships. There's a lot of cheap talk done about so-called win-win, and especially used with corporates when you're dealing with micro businesses, and usually it means the complete opposite. So it's all about being your authentic self and show you do care about others. And Muriel, I think it's fair to say you're very passionate in what you do in terms of helping clients and making a difference as well.
Absolutely. I love working with people and helping them and building that relationship. Yeah,
so that's great. And I know, Roger, having got to know you recently, clearly, and I've spoken with you a number of times over the last 2 weeks. It's been a really interesting journey, as it were. So, and a very quick intro around what we do. Our services predominantly revolves around what we class as the social selling blueprint, which is lead generation, prospect nurturing, sales optimization. A lot of people, if they've got a strong brand value proposition and need to find ways of amplifying it, it's very easy to think of single channels or single mediums of communication. And these days, we're in an omni-channel world. So it's no longer good enough just to post on LinkedIn and possibly Facebook. You have to think much more about how you can create the content to start with. So what Roger's got to share today is really ties in very well with that, because if you start off with video content as the raw element, if I can put it that way, you can actually multi-purpose that multiple times, and you can turn to podcasts, transcripts, white papers, all sorts of things. So really keen to hear what Roger's got to say, and that's obviously clearly you need to have your value brand proposition right to make sure that that everything's in sync, and you should also have a very good sense of what your numbers are in your business in terms of your strategic dashboard, and also the whole thing around about surprising and delighting clients. So we feel it's very important to help people to bring themselves forward, amplify their brand, and get their time back. And this is a really good example of repurposing. So if we took Roger's scenario here, which Roger's going to be sharing us lots of insight today, being the top one here, you can see straight away, if you go around that circle, how each part builds on each other, and then how you should really ideally bring all this together, so you end up by really leveraging all your efforts and being omni-channel present in what you're actually doing. That's a bit of a mouthful. Anyway, I want to focus on Roger now. So who's the real Roger? So Roger, it'd be really interesting to hear a little bit about you in particular. When I was reading through your details, actually, you've got a very interesting background, haven't you? Because you're heavily into, is it sort of sports events, and you've been one of the original YouTubers, is it, for about 8 years or something? Yeah, just tell us a little bit about the real Roger, what you're really passionate about, what you started off in, and how you've ended up where you are now with what you're doing.
Well, I have to say, looking at my photos there, actually, Rupert, I think the real Roger is definitely the one with the fleece and the big camera, rather than the one rather awkwardly sat in front of the pink wall. But yeah, sport has always been very important for me personally. And so I guess I started out quite early on in terms of the YouTube story. I mean, when we first started publishing content on YouTube, there was no such thing as a YouTuber. It was essentially kind of the great wild west of cat videos and that sort of thing. And in fact, when we first started creating content, we ended up using a platform called the Bright Cove Network. And Bright Cove is a big company that powers a lot of broadcasters' online video sites and that sort of thing. So it was, when we first started out, YouTube wasn't really a platform that you could use for televisual content. And that's what I was really interested in. It was this sort of idea of democratizing television, essentially, and using these platforms and social media as a means of actually making it more accessible for people to make content. And I've always been passionate about the outdoors. I've always loved the mountains, adventure sports, all that kind of thing. And we set up this channel called Outdoors TV as a pilot test, really, from our own point of view, of actually seeing what we could create, what was viable, that sort of thing. And that then, through that course, it led me into connection with British Canoeing, who's the national governing body of canoeing, Olympic canoeing, and that sort of thing. That then led to me setting up their entire YouTube operation and social media operation in conjunction with Helen Reeves, who was then their media manager, and we then went on to become business partners later on. And that in turn led me to the London Olympics and all these kind of connections. But wow. Sport is kind of, it's about stories, you know. That's what gets us excited, whether it's the story of a match or an athlete's story or their journey through injury and all that sort of thing. And I think that's why sport is such a powerful medium to work with. And certainly from my point of view as a filmmaker, that's what really floats my boat, is this idea that it's not so much about gameplay or how a match goes or who wins a race. It's what led to that, you know. And when you start working with elite athletes, Olympic athletes, you realize that journey started 20 years before they appear on our television screens. And it's all the blood, sweat and tears and all that sort of thing. And that is the bit that is really exciting. I think it's also something a lot of business people like to learn from as well, in terms of learning from athletes and what it takes to motivate yourself to get to that point. So yeah, sport has always been and still is a big factor of my life, and it's sort of a big part of the work I do, by chance, really, I think.
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. I tell you what, you probably got a lot of stories to tell, haven't you? And what better things can you better do to attend, be part of the Olympics, the whole experience, and that for free, or probably getting paid to do all that fantastic work as well. So quite something. And I'll just give a quick shout out to a few people who introduced themselves in the chat. Alex, nice to see you again here today. Alex is a man who loves his tech, so anyone who knows him will be well aware that he's got a very sophisticated OBS setup. And I think I've just caught a button by myself, actually, by accident, but there we go. And but obviously Rod, you're the person in the field doing all this hard work, which is really tough part, isn't it? Nikki, welcome. Charlotte as well. Nice to see you as well. Hopefully a little bit drier up there and less windy than it is down south today. So thank you for joining us. So let's get to the real nub of today, which is really a discussion about all these points. And it's about really how to be relevant to your audience, how to make your content stand out, how to bypass newsfeed limitations, and how to give you a strong on-screen performance, and how to make content people want to watch. And actually, this week's session is going to be really interesting because it ties in really well with next week's session, which is all about storytelling. Storytelling is a big part of this as well, isn't it? Because you have to be able to get, all the salient points across, so people really buy into your mission, vision, and everything else. Like, people remember stories rather than anything else, don't they? And experiences. But yeah, so Roger, what is a really good way of determining how you can create content which is relevant to your audience? What tips would you give around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a big subject, and it's quite tricky to sort of pin down like one or two pointers. But I think the point is in the question, in a sense, is to actually be relevant to your audience. So it's really important that you first of all understand who you're trying to communicate with. That's the first thing. It's so easy, it's become so easy to publish material. And it's very easy to end up basically casting a very wide net. And yes, you will have some organic success that way. But if you actually have a real point to what you're trying to do, and you really actually have a strong outcome that you want to get, it's essential that you understand who your audience is in the first place, why they would be interested in you, and then to be really, really clear what it is that you're trying to say. And I think it's also a question of understanding the genres of content as well. We are bombarded. There's almost like a new platform coming out every month. It can be just an absolute minefield for people to work their way through things. Should I be live streaming? Should I be podcasting? Should I be creating videos? What should I be doing? And I think it's essential then to actually, to be relevant to your audience, you need to know what sort of content your audience is likely to want to consume. Yes. The podcasting market is really quite clear in a sense. The type of people that the sort of people are looking for podcasts to consume. Quite often, it's a take anywhere sort of content. So quite often they can be busy people who are looking to listen to something on the go. So it's quite easy to sort of identify the type of content that's going to fit your audience if you just think about the audience in the first place, and then think about how you can be relevant to them and how you can then position yourself and use the right type of content. It's not just about how successful the platform is, how popular the platform is, or how popular a certain type of content is. Just because podcasts are huge doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the best result by making a podcast if your particular audience isn't necessarily engaging with podcasts. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting as well, because there's a great discussion as well about how long things should actually be. If you speak to perhaps a typical millennial now, people's attention span, quite a bit younger, tends to be a lot shorter than us oldies, if I can put it there. We're not including you in that conversation, Roger, by the way, referring to you. But it's an interesting one. As I was speaking to our son, Sam, who's 24, and he loves Audible, and he also loves podcasts. Yeah. And also, I personally watch a lot of YouTube videos. So I use it as a great source of education. But if I look back at a lot of the things that I watch, a lot of it's actually about 30 minutes long. Now, they're obviously about shorter ones. Our son, Sam, was saying the other day with podcasts, some of the ones he listens to are nearly 2 hours long. Yeah. But what he does, he might listen to part of it, then listen to the rest of it later on. So, which really surprised me because, I just quoted a stereotype of millennials tending to like things in short bursts. But then actually, if the story is interesting enough around that and the topic is interesting enough, then people will actually listen, won't they? They may take it in bite-sized chunks. So, but of course, you're a master of that. And while we're on that point of YouTube, as a point of interest, what are some of the points, tips you would really give in terms of creating really engaging content on say YouTube or say some of the social channels like Facebook?
Well, first of all, to pick up on this whole point of duration, it is really important, because it tends to be one of the first things we're asked by clients. Or one of the first things they say in the brief. It's like, we'd like a 2 to 3 minute piece of video, or how we think it should be about that sort of length. And the only rule to this is that there are no rules in that respect. It was the case a number of years ago when everything was very new and people really only had the ability, and also that in terms of the technology, you know, we've come on leaps and bounds, and we all stream everything from, you know, Netflix is essentially the same as YouTube. It's just a different setup. But essentially the technology, you know, it's all streaming. So if it's not about that there is the correct length of time for a piece of video, it's like a piece of string. You give it what it needs and what there is in terms of the material you've got to work with. And I think that's also something, when you're looking at things certainly to put on YouTube, it's all about sort of the caliber of the content, of what's in it. So if for instance, if I were to just sit here and talk at the camera for 3 hours long, well, that's not very interesting, unless you have a particular interest in what I've got to say. But equally, if I were to do an edit, you know, and put that up, and it's dynamic and it changes, it's going to hold your attention. We can learn so much from television, you know, because television has been around for so much longer than social media. And they do things on television because that's the way it works. It works. You know, it's not that we are in television, we do things this way. They do things that way because it works, because it has to, because it's such an expensive business. So, you know, you can have an hour or 2 hour documentary, which is utterly captivating. So if you were to put that on YouTube, it would still be utterly captivating on YouTube or on Facebook or even on Twitter, if you could get it to run that long. So that is the thing. I think it's subject matter. It's not just looking to put video out. It's actually, why does this need to be in video? Why should this be a video production? There's an awful lot of content out there that could just as easily be photographic or text-based.
Sorry to interrupt you. You're probably about to answer this, but how do you make your content really stand out and be different?
You first of all, you absolutely drill into that thing that's coming in your next stream, which is storytelling. It is all about storytelling. I mean, storytelling has become this kind of like, storytelling is the new black sort of thing. You know, it's become this thing that everybody taps into, and everybody's trying to be a storyteller. But the fact is, the essence of it, without story, there is nothing.
Yeah.
If it's a brand promo, you know, something which is purely advertising, and a great example of that is Compare the Market. You know, who on earth managed to get that concept past the client?
Yeah.
You know, we're going to animate you some meerkats, and that's going to sell your comparison site.
And then collectibles.
Yeah, I would have shake that person's hand, because that was a work of genius. And so this is the thing. But storytelling, you know, you either create a story or you reveal the story, and that's what people connect with, because it's a human thing. So if we just sort of put words up on the screen and do this, do that, and buy this and buy that, it's a very detached relationship that you have with people. Whereas if you can tap into that story, whatever it is, and you can do it in terms of promotional content, or it doesn't have to be just something which is creative or documentary. Anything has a story to it. So that's the first thing. And then to make sure that there is real substance to what you're putting out, that it has value, that is the key thing.
And some great tips there as well. Now, obviously, I think you said that the length doesn't matter so much, but are there certain types of lengths of production you might use, say on YouTube, simply because it's probably the big one that's known to the greatest extent, for different things? For example, if you've got something which is more of a case study, for example, is there like an optimum length that you might use for that versus something which is educational versus something which is promotional? Are there Do you tend to be certain optimum lengths in your experience with that?
There are generally, yes. I mean, for instance, if you're looking to create a punchy little video clip that is going to generate some action quickly on something like Instagram, yeah, you want it to be 20 seconds, 30 seconds, because it's kind of the nature of what it is that you're trying to create, in a sense. I often like to quote my mother-in-law in situations like this, when we would always try and, my mother-in-law is from Croatia, so it's a very Mediterranean mother-in-law, and we would always try and glean from her what should be in these recipes that she would share with us. How much salt, how much pasta, as much as it needs. And that is the way I like to share with people, you know, in terms of when you're creating a piece of content, it's as long as it needs, as much as it needs to tell, either to tell the story or to get the message across. If you've got a whole load of contributions from people and they are all fantastic and they tell a great story and it's emotional and it has all those elements that you want to create a successful piece of video, put them all in. Let it be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it takes. That's the thing. So there is an optimum length for certain genres. Obviously, if you're making a documentary, you don't want it to be 2 minutes long. It's not enough. But it really should be led by the content that you acquire to create it, or the content that you have. And then it will, if you follow that approach as much as it needs, then you will get the right length of video. If you try and force it into a 2 minute, 30 second, 10-minute block, you'll struggle, because it won't be right. It needs to be, it's an organic thing. It's kind of almost a living thing, a piece of video. It has to be what it has to be.
Yeah. It's interesting. It reminds me of a film. I don't know if you've seen it, Roger, or anyone else in this live streams has seen it today. It's getting quite an old film now. There's a film called Amadeus, which I love. I'm not normally into these costume type things very much, but of course it's about Mozart and Salieri, if I got that right. And in places it's very funny. In other places it's really, really dark. In fact, very dark. But there's a lovely piece where Mozart writes this beautiful composition. It plays in front of a really large audience, and the emperor comes up afterwards, and Mozart asks the emperor what he thinks of it, and he says, really good, but too many notes. That was like a red rag to the bull to Mozart, and he said, it's just got exactly the right number of notes, not too little and not too much. If I took out some of the notes, it would not, in effect, be the same. But it just made me sort of really think about what you're saying there, because that, as you say, if you try and force something into a certain length, then it can come across like that. And we've probably all seen programs on television as well, where they've had to fill up an hour, and perhaps they've just run out of steam part of the way through, and you think, what the hell have I just spent, last hour watching, So
yes.
But no, it's really interesting, this whole part. And I'm very intrigued also about your comment that you made about how to bypass newsfeed limitations. Can you just clarify what those limitations are, first of all?
Well, there are a number of limitations with news feeds, in a sense, aren't there? So I suppose the most obvious one is what we see on Facebook. And again, it kind of comes back into this same place. So with Facebook, you have the situation where Mark Zuckerberg, bless his cotton socks, created the news feed, but then did us all a big favor in muting videos automatically, so that we don't have suddenly the sound blaring out. So that then creates a situation where you have muted videos with no sound. So that's one limitation in terms of how it will automatically play out. So if you're putting content on Facebook, quite often what will happen is that then people reach for the caption button, and then they burn in captions into their video to try and get around the limitation of the fact that there's no audio. Things like that. And then there are things like runtime on Instagram, where if the video is longer than a certain duration, I think it's 30 seconds. I have to check.
I think it might be a minute.
Yeah, it kind of varies when I look at them. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it, but 30 seconds to a minute, then it automatically then goes on to Instagram TV, and you get this little thing saying continue watching on Instagram TV, and I go, well, I was interested up to that point, but do you know what? I'm not that interested, so I'm not going to click through. I'm just going to keep scrolling. And there's also this thing that the news feed it's like an organic beast. It has a life of its own, because essentially things will refresh and then they'll pop up and then you'll scroll on, and also in terms of your audience, they are just scrolling through looking for something to attract their attention. So there are all these sort of limitations in terms of, it's not that you can reach your audience, sit them down and make them watch your thing that you've made. So
there's lots of choices.
Yeah. That's it. So for instance,
sorry.
No, I was going to say, so in terms of, for instance, the thing, an easy example in terms of getting around this is first of all, is to actually consider the environment that you're operating in. So learn what the newsfeed is like from your point of view, pick out what you do when you scroll, and your actions, and learn from that and think, well, hang on, if I'm doing that, somebody else is doing that. So I want to do something that's going to bypass that. And a great way, for instance, in terms of the muted audio is like, why, if you're making a piece of video to go on Facebook, why create something that has to have audio where you then have to put captions over the top so people know what you're saying, or you have to put a thing up saying, please turn your audio on? Why not just use it for a different purpose and actually then create something which is predominantly visual, where you're getting your message across in a strong way? That's the sort of the angle of like looking to bypass the limitations. And in terms of the scrolling thing, front load your content with really eye-grabbing, exciting material that you front load it, that actually makes people stop and watch. You can get that attention. So it's about actually being a little bit creative. It's about understanding how you use the social feed and actually learning from yourself, and then actually also thinking about what is going to get somebody to pay attention.
Yeah. And as far as Facebook is concerned, attention is the currency, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, because, as users don't pay for using Facebook, but Facebook make money from advertising, and they make money from advertising on how long you spend actually on the platform. So, and they've got all these data scientists, haven't they, which literally analyze things all the time to see how they can keep on hooking you, getting you to stay on the platform. And it's really interesting as well, because I tried an experiment a few weeks ago, and it's interesting because I was always very uncomfortable about creating so-called shaky cam, and I'd probably someone like you, Roger, being a true professional, would probably almost squirm in your grave, at the thought of it years ago.
I'm not dead yet.
Well, there's a slight relief to hear that.
Touch wood.
But it's interesting as well, because I, as an experiment, tried a piece of shaky cam, as I call it, and then tried 3 different ways of presenting the same video. One was in a fairly not panoramic, but not even 6x4, but 16:9 format, or whatever it is.
Widescreen.
And then the other version was had got captions on it, and the other version had got a banner at the top which changed as you went through the video, and then the captions more as different calls for action to try and grab people's attention. And as a point of interest, we're interested to know which one of those 3 do you think works best out of all of those?
So I'm going to probably be a bit controversial, and I'm going to say actually just a straightforward video that has real visual value in it. Mainly because if you learn from your own behaviours, whenever I see widescreen video in a square space, usually it's you've got the blocks at the top and the bottom. Usually there's a banner message at the top. Sometimes that changes, sometimes it doesn't. And usually the captions are in the bottom section. And then sometimes there's also stuff going on the screen. And you genuinely cannot cope with that level of information. The eye cannot process it. The brain cannot process it. And so what ends up happening is you just get this pile of spaghetti of words and images, and you kind of end up going, I just no idea what you're saying, or I got an idea what you're saying, but I'm not prepared to stick around to try and figure it out. And I think this is something that I'm quite evangelical about, is, it's not about making difficult choices or learning, the level of sort of skill that someone in my position would need to earn a living at it. It's actually just settling things down, breaking them down into like a logical process, and then you do things that are going to have the greatest chance of succeeding. And all the time, it is about, if you put all of the effort into the content itself, giving content that has value, that's emotive, that's going to connect with people on a human level. You don't need the banners. You don't need, well, you will need the captions if it is, if it's a piece that has to have speech, you can't get around that. But so many times, people resort to filming themselves or like be talking head videos in order to say something that could actually be said much more impactfully with text or pictures in terms of, just the message. So I think that's the thing for me. It's don't just automatically reach for the iPhone and shoot, find your nearest bookshelf and stand in front of it and record something. It's just think, what would be the best way for people to engage with this? Yeah,
I think it's really interesting. And actually, by the way, the what we found was exactly what you said.
Right.
So the thing is, what's fascinating was the whole psychology of so-called shaky cam, because to my perception, in my simple world, you'd think it doesn't look very professional. But I think the interesting thing I've found as well, I think that possibly the other reason why it seemed to work better without a lot of the effects in this particular case, is I think people felt you were more communicating with them personally. So it's something like you'd actually recorded just for them as a personal message. Yeah. So it's this psychology behind this is absolutely fascinating, and I think
that is a really good point you made. Sorry to just interrupt a second. That is a really good point that you made. In terms of looking for content that is going to really connect with people, I've shot stuff on my iPhone on the top of Snowdon in a gale, and I've published it and used it, and it's quite funny because I look like an idiot and my hat keeps blowing off, but it's real, it's in the moment, and it is clearly not a staged event. It's clearly not a constructed reality, and that's one of the things that people really love. Is that feeling of authenticity about it. So the shaky cam, we actually on a professional shoot, we will actually routinely do what we call wobblies, or what I call wobblies, which is basically I will just then wander around with a handheld camera and just get some wobbly shots that have some life to them. Because it's just more in the moment.
It feels much more dynamic, doesn't it? So it's much more dynamic, and it's really interesting also, this whole thing, if you watch the news as well, and how it's presented, isn't it? Because they'll tend to have the catchy headlines to start with as to what is going to be covered in the news. Then they'll lead almost with a little intro piece before they actually talk about the next topic. It's all designed to keep on your attention and draw you in, isn't it? So, but it goes back to this thing, really, attention is a currency. So on television, if you go and switch channels, they haven't made any money out of advertising from it. On Facebook, if you come off a platform because they haven't got your attention, then Facebook are not making money from advertisers, are they? And the same with YouTube. So, but it's
and also now YouTube is actually rewarding attention rather than just views. It's like part of the metrics on YouTube that determine how well your videos perform relates to the level of retention as well. So this is also a part of the driver in terms of actually people creating longer form content on YouTube. Admittedly, it's you've got a lot of stuff. You've got film length stuff. You've got TV length stuff. Gamers are streaming for hours, and so it all depends on the genre. But if they sense that if your content is actually keeping people interested and especially if they're responding, if they're liking because they're getting something of value out of it, that is then playing out in your favor on YouTube.
Yeah, and the method of advertising YouTube is sort of fascinating. In fact, I end up succumbing to a subscription on YouTube in the end, simply because I just couldn't stand the adverts. And also what I found particularly annoying on YouTube is that the way you would have to actually skip the adverts every time you could, it would be different. So sometimes, and it's quite often require you touching the screen as well. So you might be watching passively with your phone like that. You can't see your phone, sorry, but and actually then it requires some form of action, which is just irritating. And of course, you touch it the wrong way, it then goes off the YouTube video, and you got to find something else. So it's I think perhaps this is where Facebook perhaps been a little bit smarter with things. Obviously, YouTube's great, and I love it, but they've made it so it does feel much more, in some ways, much more integrated within the platform, possibly. But it's obviously a different medium. But this whole thing is fascinating, isn't it? So is that what you meant about bypassing newsfeed limitations? Some other examples, for example, on Twitter, if you were streaming there, or on Instagram, do you find that the style on those platforms is quite different to what it would be on a Facebook or a YouTube?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was quite an early adopter of Facebook, mainly because I just business contacts were started using it before. Actually, Facebook originally was kind of like LinkedIn in a sense of how it was viewed by its users. So I started using it a long time ago. Can't remember exactly when. Back when MySpace was the big thing.
Oh gosh,
and of course that was just a horrendous experience. And all the professionals I was networking with, and certainly in terms of broadcast and everything, were saying, "Oh, well, you're on Facebook," and everybody kind of migrated to Facebook. And used it in the way actually that they're using LinkedIn now. But it has evolved an awful lot, and they are constantly, for instance, they've definitely tried to sort of muscle in on, they've parked their tanks on YouTube's lawn in terms of video. There was quite a controversy about a year or so ago, essentially because people were encouraged to sort of natively post content on Facebook. And of course, what they didn't realize was this was basically destroying their YouTube operation, because they weren't getting any clicks through to their YouTube channel, whether they could monetize the content, stuff like that. So it's a bit of a bun fight at the moment, and each channel, each platform is trying to sort of tweak everything. And I think there isn't. I haven't got a big long list of these are the bad things about these platforms and this is what you can do about it as such. But it is actually a question of for my mind, it's more this principle of there is always a way around it. Like I say, if the sound is muted, switch to visuals, these sort of things. If the time run is limited, then treat that as a trailer, and then actually drive people to somewhere where they can watch a full length version or something like that.
That's a good way. Yes, that's interesting.
Yeah, so for instance, it could well be that you, for instance, post a video and then also put a link in the text that allows you then to drive people to the full length or something like that. It's a question of actually, I suppose if you see that there is a problem yourself, or if you see that there's an issue and a limitation with the platform, it's like, okay, just have a little think about it, and that'll give you an idea of what you can do about it.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Thank you for that. We've got some other questions I'd love to ask you in just a second, but I just want to reach out to people on the live stream as well. So those of you on the live stream today, I hope you're really enjoying it. And if you're watching this afterwards, do still ask questions, because we do look at those and do our best to respond. Nikki, you made a very relevant point here about relevance applies across the message and the medium and method of delivery, which is probably a good point, actually, really, isn't it, one way or another? So what Nikki's saying there. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with relevance, it comes back to this thing of that we've become quite tribal, especially on social media, and for instance, I've got friends who are only on Instagram because they like it because it's a pictorial thing and they feel quite kind of comfortable with it just being posting pictures. Others who are far more active across the piece. So it's in terms of relevance, it's like understanding, as I said earlier, you know, the audience that you're trying to reach, you know, where they are, which platforms they're using, which kind of content they're likely to enjoy. And then making yourself relevant to them in how you conduct yourself. You know, if you've got people who are by nature perhaps quite reserved, well, you don't want to be like some brash American YouTuber. You want to create content which is going to sit comfortably with them.
Yeah, hopefully that leads in really nice to the next point. I wanted just to ask you just a second. Those who join us on the live stream today do ask questions, by the way, and we do love those questions. So do speak out or reach out if you've got any comments or thoughts on that. As a matter of interest, perhaps give us a few examples of the type of things you enjoy on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, and it might be certain interests you actually have, or how long you tend to find, whether you find any sort of trends in terms of how long you watch things for, and what makes things really stand out. So it'd be interesting just to hear your thoughts. So do feedback on that. And we've sort of gone into this a little bit, but the next point really is about how you can give a strong on-screen performance. And it's quite an art to it, isn't it, in all of this?
Yeah.
Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I've run a lot of workshops coaching quite a lot of business people actually in terms of how they can give a better on-screen performance. And it is, I think the first thing to do, it's quite easy to think because, you know, talking head video, as you might call it, is ubiquitous now, whether it's live streaming or anything like that. But it is actually a skill. It's a real skill, and it's something which is actually very difficult to do well. You know, there is a reason Hugh Edwards is paid what he's paid, you know, because it's like all those years of experience, and it's extremely good. So it's not something to enter into lightly, and it's something, again, we often, in fact, have discussed with clients in the past. It's like, well, they'll say, oh, well, you want to speak to the chief executive and get an interview with him. And we'll go, well, okay, yes, but why is he the right person to convey that message? Just because he's the chief executive, he might not necessarily be the most engaging person. So there's these things to consider. You know, it's like, it's not an automatic thing that I would always advise everybody to put themselves on screen. You have to be comfortable. And that is one of the key things to it, is to stay within your comfort zone, and also just to keep focused on what you're capable of.
Yeah.
You know, I've often had people saying, well, can I put my iPad underneath the lens of the camera and then read what's written on it? I said, no, because it will show.
Yeah, people can see it.
You can see it. You can see it. I have, you know, whenever I do workshops, I have this thing where I say, look, you have to understand video both suppresses and amplifies at the same time. So it is going to suppress all your mannerisms. So you might think you're going like this, when in fact on screen it's just like this.
Yeah.
And all of your weaknesses, video will amplify way beyond your comfort zone.
It's like I've gone slightly purple. So we're trying to fiddle around this before today. It's an example of how you just try and strive for perfection, and yet still I looked up and got in the Mediterranean sun for about 6 hours. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it is. You know, so this is a key thing. You know, if for instance, if you're uncertain about what you're talking about, it will show up in your eyes, and you will look shifty. I guarantee it. You will. I guarantee it. You will look shifty. And if you're trying to sell something to somebody, it's not a good look to look shifty. So again, the angle for that is like, okay, well, why is it that you are planning to be on screen delivering an on-screen performance as opposed to filming something which illustrates what you're trying to say? That's the first thing. But once you're on screen, once you're actually doing this on-screen performance, you have to, as I say, you have to stay within your comfort zone. You've got to stay talking about things that you feel very comfortable talking about. It's really important to engage with the camera lens, even if it's a phone. more often than not, people will look at the screen. But of course, that isn't where the camera is.
No.
And you can see it. So, for instance, I'm just going to look at my monitor now, so I can see you. I can now see you, Rupert. So I'm now talking to you. But of course, I'm actually looking at the camera. I'm looking at the monitor. So the you can see where the camera is on the phone. It's that little dot that's really hard to see. But you have to look at that.
Yes.
So because, funnily enough, the audience isn't actually in the screen. The audience is in the camera. The audience is in the lens.
Yeah.
So it's things like this. And another really, really important thing is, often people try and make up or sort of just walk their way through a piece of dialogue. We always advise, certainly in a professional situation, we always advise, script it, break the lines down into sort of short paragraphs, single lines, deliver your lines well, one by one, piece by piece, and then this is why we would stitch it together in the edit, and then we would conceal all the cuts with illustrative footage. Because I've worked with so many people who've come into the room and tried to basically give a speech, and we end up in this territory where they're trying to think of what they're going to say next, and they start looking around and they look awkward and uncomfortable, and then they have to stop, and then they forget, and then they get flustered. So it's making it as simple as possible for yourself, breaking it down into little chunks, and staying within your comfort zone. That's the key.
This whole thing is interesting, actually, because I remember when, in fact, Steve Holland was on this live stream a few weeks ago. He's got a really good professional setup in the studio in Ashford in Middlesex. And I went into their studios. We had a really great interview, a bit like we're having now, but obviously the professional setup. And it worked out really well. And so I said, look, can I pay you to do some other promotional work for us? And this time around, he actually would ask me the question, but they would want me to repeat the question and answer the question if I got that right. And it must have taken me an extraordinary number of attempts, ridiculous. And of course, in the end, my brain was self-sabotaging things completely. I was saying to myself, I'm crap, And in the end, he was actually, I have to give him his credit, Steve Harnett is very patient, he's very funny as well. But he still managed to still stay calm. And when he edited and joined it all together, he really made something look really, really good. I thought, how the hell did he do that? But I think the thing is, the point I think also we have to work to our style as well, because I find if I'm having a conversation like you and I are having a conversation now, to me, it's very natural. So I love speaking to people, love hearing from people. But if you ask me to read from a script, or to try and remember things and read certain points back, I struggle with it. And maybe in my case, I know I'm dyslexic, or a bit dyslexic, and I get my words the wrong way around. So some of those of you who've seen me today, a bit earlier on, you'll probably notice I got words a little bit the wrong way around in certain places. And I've just had to learn to deal with it. You get over it. But I think at the end of the day, people do like you being authentic, whether you're perfect or not. And obviously the techniques you use there. I mean, if you get someone in front of the camera and perhaps they struggle a little bit, or they're really nervous of it, or they think it was this inanimate object, which they don't really think of perhaps communicating with another person. Have you got some tips around that with people who are a bit more apprehensive in front of the camera?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I mean, when I did quite a bit of sort of bits and bobs of TV in a former life, and the first time I had to present to camera, I had a fantastic cameraman. Julius was his name. We were doing some mountain bike stuff, and he was, TV cameraman with this whopping great camera on his shoulder, and the viewfinder on his eye. But with his other eye, he was communicating with me, and he always told me, he said, talk to me through the lens. So it's like, actually talk to me, not to the audience or anything, like just talk to me, the cameraman, through the lens. And whenever I did a good take that he was happy with, his left eyebrow used to go up like that. I thought, I just kept looking for the eyebrow moving. But this relationship is really important. And, we are in a time when more and more of us are creating video content ourselves. And I'm absolutely all for that. I love the fact that it's possible for anyone to create content. I think I put this in my preamble for this. It's just that this is something I'm really passionate about, the democratization of video. But there are certain types of content where you really do want to work with professionals, and if you've got to deliver some tricky lines or something, you've got to say something really convincingly. It can't just be as a conversation. You actually have to deliver it. Having a director or a self-shooting director, as we call it, who can make you feel at ease. And when I'm filming, this is my job, basically. It's not to operate the camera. I don't consider myself to be a cameraman. I'm a sort of a storyteller director who uses the camera. And it's about drawing out that performance from somebody. People might think performance is the wrong word to use, but it is a performance, because even if you're being convincing and you're being natural, it is a performance. And if you are just being purely authentic and just being yourself, and it's not going to get the result that you want. You always will be trying to put some kind of slant on it. So having that ability to have somebody behind the camera who can put you at ease, draw out a good performance is invaluable. But to me, I will always take the last take from a sequence that I've filmed. I will always carry on filming and go over and over again until I'm really happy with it. And it's always the last take that I use. So when I'm directing someone, I'll have this technique where I can see that it's getting a bit difficult. And I will say, that last take, that was really good. Okay, so we've got one in the bag. We don't have to worry. We've got one take. That's good. Just give me another two for variety, to just so that I've got some choices and the edit. And it might sound like I'm deceiving them, but it automatically puts people at ease, because they think, okay, I've got that. I've done that line. That's fine. And then instantly they relax, and instantly they give me the best take they've given. And it's more about the psychology of it. If you think everything's fine, it doesn't matter, I can just play around now, I can relax now, you will. And whether you're filming it yourself or working with a professional, you just keep doing it. I think quite often people want to try and be able to knock things out really quickly. And it's really important to understand when you're doing something, whether it's on your phone, whether it's a live stream, whatever it is, to consider your audience, to value your audience, respect your audience, and do the very best you can, and actually to keep going until you've really got it nailed. If that line is a bit tricky, keep going. You'll get there. Yeah. But there are so many on-camera tips that would probably take us all night to discuss.
I'm really thoroughly enjoying this. We've got a couple of other questions which perhaps come to in just a second. Also, we're going to have like 3 or 4 minutes, just quick wrap up, and then what we'll do is we'll come back and cover one last question plus what's been evolved in the chat. So if that's Roger, just bear with us just a second. I'll be back with you, and Daniel and Charlotte, I think you've asked some questions as well. So Muriel, could you be ready to come in a moment with those questions from Charlotte and Daniel? That'd be great. So I'm going to share my screen just for a moment again. Spare me a second. There we go. Sorry, I would share my screen, but I have doing something wrong here. Here we go. Right. So this is what we've sort of so far talked about over the last 30, 40 minutes or so, which has been absolutely fascinating. And we'll come back to this in just a second. Just a very quick sort of wrap up, and then we'll come to these other questions. Clearly, we are here to help you in terms of what we're doing. Just a very quick reminder, we do have our next mini conference on Tuesday, the 1st of June, which is 3 to 5 o'clock. We're going to run this in a bit of a different format to last time around. We're going to have much more in the way of Q&A, so people will be able to interact a lot more with that as well. So do come along and do enjoy. So that's Tuesday, the 1st of June, which you're very welcome to take part in. And I mentioned to you that I guess next week, Michael de Groot, I got to meet him actually about 2 or 3 years ago when he very kindly asked me to take part in his podcast. And very interesting person. He's Dutch, and he's all about how storytelling affects your brain, research on the use of visuals, I can't even say that next word, forgetting curve, and how you experience the hero's journey and how to implement this in your business from tomorrow. So it should be a great session. That's very complimentary today, actually. So I think we'll all find that really interesting. Those of you who are not familiar with us to such an extent, if you want to find out more about what we do, if you go to businessgrowthbureau.tv, and what you'll notice there are several options in the menu. You can first of all register for the mini conference from one of the buttons on the homepage. And you can also register for an on-demand webinar, which will give you, it's much more focused about the 7 key areas you need to put in place to bring yourselves forward, amplify your brand, and get your time back. And then you've got these weekly live streams, which are accessible from there. And what you can also do is take part in what we class as a sales and marketing diagnostic. And from that, you actually get a really nice 8-page personalized report sent to you within about 30 minutes. And you also get your relevant scores. And the way you can get to that is by, again, from the homepage of the website, or go to businessgrowthbureau.tv/diagnostic. And it takes about 4.5 to 6 minutes to complete. And one of the things I'm very keen to do as well is give you Roger's details as well. So, Roger, it's mediapackuk.com. Is that correct? That's right, yeah. Yeah, that's your web address. And Roger's phone number is there as well. And also Roger's email address too. So if you're enjoying today and you've got some questions, do reach out to Roger. Obviously, he is a real expert in this space, and I'm sure you really thoroughly enjoy working with Roger. So what we'll do, if it's all right with you, Roger, we'll come back to you in just a second. Here we go. So I'll come back with Muriel as well. So Muriel, welcome back as well. So so I think a couple more questions got fed through as well. So Muriel, who's next? Is it Charlotte?
Charlotte, yeah. Yeah, Charlotte, what Charlotte's saying, I can really relate to this. She said it's quite hard, even in Zoom meetings, to look at the lens rather than the person you're talking to. Feels like you're looking past them, whereas, of course, face-to-face, it'd be eye contact. So my camera is up here. So if I'm looking at it, you can all see that I'm not looking down at you, can't you? So what's the way around that?
I think in Zoom meetings, it's not such a problem, really, because we've all kind of had to adapt to using this sort of technology. It's more when you're actually trying to communicate with an audience, whether it's for promotional purposes or for entertainment, that sort of thing. So I wouldn't worry about it too much for Zoom meetings as such, but certainly for when you're actually trying to make a presentation, the thing that is going to connect you with the audience is the lens of the camera. So just to make sure that you look at that. It's quite difficult, as I say, because I've got 2 screens, I've got 4 screens actually, and each of them I can see myself, I can see you, I can see all sorts of things, and it's very distracting. But I guess it's just all those years of doing it, I'm now focusing on the lens of the camera. So first of all is know where the webcam is on your laptop precisely, and then zoom in on that if you can when you actually really want to make a point. But I wouldn't worry about it too much for Zoom meetings. Yeah,
that's a good tip. It's interesting because I've bought one of these. I haven't used it so much recently, actually, but it's one of these like crocodile arms and you can actually fix it on something in the back of your monitor, then bring it forward in front of the screen, so you're all the time looking directly at the screen. The only thing I've found is a right pain is you find the very thing you need to look at is quite often just behind the camera, which you've brought forward. So I've sort of given up on that idea at the moment, but I've sort of repositioned everything on the screen. So I'm hopefully all being well looking at you most of the time, but probably not very successfully.
It is quite tricky with so, for instance, especially if you're filming on your phone, for instance, if you're not doing a Zoom chat, but you're actually filming on your phone, because you need that screen to make sure that you're sort of positioned in the right place. Yeah. But traditionally, when, of course, we wouldn't normally have that imagery so easily accessible to us. If you're just working with a camera in the olden days, you would just have the camera, you would have a monitor that you could see, but it wouldn't distract you as much as it does when you've got that big screen and then the little dot on the side, which is the camera. So it's a lot harder nowadays, I'll say that. So I'm not surprised, if people find themselves being distracted and looking at the screen when they're talking.
Yeah, well, no, thanks. Daniel's not being greedy here. He's asked 2 questions straight off the bat. So, go for it, Daniel.
So Daniel's saying that a question about making videos. Is it unrealistic to want to make videos without a video professional, a director, etc.? Is it inevitably amateur? Because it seems there's a huge barrier of several £100 per video.
It's not something that you shouldn't try, and it's not something that is purely the domain of professionals. I mean, we use what we call user-generated content in pretty much all of our client videos. They tend to supply content. It's a question of actually understanding the basic process, and then using the right equipment. So for instance, there is, if you've got a reasonably well-powered laptop, there's software called DaVinci Resolve, which is it might put some people off. It's actually sort of a kind of a Hollywood standard level of software, but it is actually free to download, and you can use that for nothing, and you've got that tool at your disposal. And there are some very good tutorials that will get you going with that. And it's simply then a question of actually piecing together the little bits of video that you shoot to make a video. It's about learning the process, really. It depends on the kind of thing you're trying to do. If it's something for business, if it's something to promote a business, I would always say at least work with professionals who can piece it together. You can shoot. It's very, we do this ourselves. We have clients who will film stuff, whether it's on their cameras or their phones, and then they would send it to us, and we then do the really difficult bit, which is the editing side of things. But I wouldn't want anybody to think that there's a barrier there. It's a question. If you're prepared to research a little bit, learn, you can teach yourself. And it's about being realistic. And if it's anything promotional where your brand is at stake, whether it's your personal brand or your business brand, I would always say, work with professionals for that, because in terms of the time cost for you to try and do it yourself, and the results that you're likely to get, you'll get a far better result with professionals. But don't sort of stop yourself from looking to get into making videos because it feels like there's a barrier there, because there shouldn't be.
Formidable growth in that space, isn't it? And I think got one final point from Nikki as well, Mira, is that right? So so Nikki's saying, on video, including Zoom meetings, when I'm delivering workshops, I imagine a miniature version of the viewer in the camera lens and talk to them whilst keeping the people on screen in the peripheral vision. Connecting through the camera is a skill which I trained in several years ago, and it's been very useful in the last year as well.
She's absolutely right. This is what we were talking about earlier. It's the audience is where the lens is. That's the thing. And the audience wants you to connect with them. They want to see your eyes looking directly at them. Quite often you see even in television programs that we do things where you'll have two different camera angles. Usually there's one which is head on and one which is a side shot. And quite often sometimes you'll see somebody talking directly into the camera lens, and then for some reason they'll cut to a side shot. But what the person is saying is they're still speaking directly to the audience. So it's almost as though I suddenly turn like that and I start talking to you like that, which doesn't make any sense. So it's this thing, the lens is the vital bit. That's where the magic happens. Yeah. So she's absolutely right. But it is something that you need to work on. You can do it with just like a little shaving mirror, one of those little circular shaving mirrors. You can just talk to yourself in the bathroom endlessly. And as long as you can see your own eyes, you know that you are looking into the lens. As in this case, if you can't see your eyes, then you're not looking straight into the lens.
I love that as a final tip, because I always used to say it's like looking at hairs in the palm of your hands. It's the first sign of madness if you're talking to a mirror, isn't it?
I strongly advocate. I do it every day. Yeah.
Well, the good thing is it can't answer back, can it? So it might crack, but it can't answer back. No reflection on you, Roger, of course. On that very happy note, I think we better call it a wrap. Welcome, Renata, and everyone else who's joined us today as well. And thank you ever so much for joining us on today's live stream. This will be it's actually on Facebook and YouTube now, but we'll also do a slight edit, which will be up on our website certainly by tomorrow morning, and we'll probably then republish this in about 2 weeks' time, and also be on a podcast as well. So we do swallow our own medicine. But it's been a very enjoyable session today, Roger. Clearly you're a real expert in your space. I hadn't realized you've got such an interesting background before today. So thank you very much indeed for contributing. And yeah, you're absolutely welcome. So Roger, stay with us for a few moments, but everyone else, thank you very much indeed. And we'll see you on next week's live stream with our friend, and that'll be a great session as well. So have a great week, the rest of you. Thank you very much indeed.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.